We accept a very specific social contract when we book a short-term rental. We hand over a credit card and trust that a series of digital photos guarantees a secure private environment. We trade our money for temporary sanctuary, relying entirely on the assumption that the host on the other side of the screen is operating in good faith. A photographer traveling solo for an overnight shoot project booked a quiet 5-day stay in Portland, Oregon. The property was a small Airbnb bungalow just outside the city. The digital storefront presented a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom vintage home with good lighting and a clean kitchen. It looked entirely normal. There was one anomaly. This digital review interface shows a generally positive rating, but the guest explicitly notes, "Nice place, but I kept hearing movement above me at night." The photographer read that line and immediately chalked it up to squirrels. When a single warning sign threatens our sense of security, the brain instinctively invents a harmless explanation for it. We rationalize the anomaly, choosing to believe in local wildlife or old floorboards to maintain the comforting belief that we are safe. The physical arrival presented a different reality. Tall trees completely choked out the sunlight around the property. The host, a woman named Elaine, was absent. She had simply left the key under a rock, with a single, remarkably brief instruction: make yourself comfortable. Inside the house, the first red flag wasn't something the photographer could see. It was a physical sensation. The ceilings felt heavy. They weren't physically low enough to touch, but the proportions of the rooms were off. The space above felt compressed. This 3D wireframe cross-section illustrates the architecture of a standard bungalow. Notice the hollow, unused area directly beneath the pitched roof. Now look back at the online listing. It explicitly omitted any mention of an attic or overhead storage space. The true threat of an environment emerges when its digital blueprint contradicts its physical reality. The online profile promised a standard single-story home, but the structural proportions indicated a solid physical mass occupying the space directly above the living area. At 1:40 a.m. on the first night, the photographer heard a faint sound from the ceiling. It lacked the frantic scratching or skittering of an animal. It was a slow, deliberate shifting of weight. After a moment, it stopped. The next night, at exactly the same time, the noise escalated. It was a sustained, heavy dragging sound, tracking a clear, horizontal line from one side of the ceiling to the other. Then, it halted. The sound vanished, but a physical sensation replaced it, the unmistakable feeling of a heavy, still presence standing directly over the bed. The following morning, the photographer walked the exterior perimeter of the house. They checked the siding, the roofline, and the eaves. There was no exterior hatch, no ladder, and no ventilation window that would allow access to a roof space. Movement inside a sealed, externally inaccessible space means the barrier between the guest and the host has already been breached. The threat is not coming from outside. It is moving within the structure itself. Later that afternoon, the photographer found the interior access point. A small, square panel was cut into the hallway ceiling. It had no handle and no pull cord. It was perfectly camouflaged, blending seamlessly into the surrounding paint. On the third night, at 2:03 a.m., the panel shifted. A soft creak echoed through the hallway, followed by a sudden downward pressure. A light coating of dust fell from the edges of the square, confirming an active, physical weight was pressing down. 4 minutes later, the photographer's phone buzzed in the dark bedroom. It was a text from the host. Timestamp 2:07 a.m. It read, "Please don't access the attic." The photographer hadn't messaged the host or made a sound. The precision of that text message confirmed that every action inside the house was being monitored in real time. The next afternoon, curiosity overrode caution. The photographer stood on a chair and pushed the panel upward. A wave of warm, stale air flooded the hallway. Inside the crawling height space lay an active habitat. Blankets, a pillow, plastic food containers, jugs of water. Someone was living there in the present tense. This top-down architectural diagram reveals the exact geometry of the setup. In the floorboards of that attic, the occupant had carved a small gap. As you can see by the vertical sight line, The cutout was positioned directly above the center of the guest bed. A floorboard creaked inside the house. The photographer turned around to find the host standing completely motionless in the hallway. Her expression was entirely blank, as she said, "You weren't supposed to open that." She took a slow step forward. "I told you not to go up there," she said. They get nervous when people look. Before the photographer could process the plural pronoun, multiple heavy, frantic weight shifts erupted from the ceiling above them. The bungalow functioned as a viewing gallery. Its layout allowed for constant monitoring of the guests, with every room designed to be seen from the darkness above. The photographer ran out the front door and immediately called the police. Law enforcement searched the property. While the authorities never fully explained the details of what they discovered in the crawl space, one officer confirmed they found clear signs of long-term occupancy in the attic. By the following day, the digital storefront vanished. The Airbnb listing was scrubbed from the platform, and the host profile was entirely deleted, leaving absolutely zero trace of Elaine or her property. The very digital infrastructure that makes the gig economy so frictionless also protects its predators. With a few clicks, a host can dissolve their online identity entirely, abandoning a compromised physical location and resetting their trap in a new city. We often rely on the assumption that a locked front door and a secured window define the boundaries of our safety. We believe these barriers keep danger on the outside, but locking doors only secures you against external threats. To achieve true spatial awareness, you have to verify the volume of the rooms you sleep in. You have to look up, because sometimes the threat is already inside the house with you, and they have no intention of leaving. When you hit a certain level of professional burnout, the only cure feels like absolute silence. You actively seek out a vacuum, a place far away from screens, co-workers, and cell towers. That exact desire for total isolation is what drew our subject to a remote gig economy rental deep in the woods outside Asheville. The geography of the location tests that isolation almost immediately. 20 minutes out, the GPS signal dies completely. Navigating the remaining vote roads requires strictly following a set of printed directions. When the victim unlocks the front door, the first thing they notice is the air. It smells perfectly stale, like it hasn't circulated in months. Inside, the architecture is sparse. The ground floor holds a standard living room and kitchen. The upstairs contains a bedroom and a bathroom. But at the very end of the second floor hallway, there is a physical discrepancy: a plain, unmarked wooden door, locked tightly from the outside. This contradicts the original online listing, which explicitly promised access to the entire cabin. The victim texts the host, Daniel, to ask about the room. The reply comes back instantly, waving the issue away. Daniel claims it's just storage, adding, "Nothing you need. Enjoy your stay." Severe exhaustion creates a highly effective psychological blind spot. When the brain desperately needs to rest, it will aggressively rationalize away red flags to protect that goal. Unsettling reviews and a deadbolt on a strange interior door are filed away as harmless quirks of an old building, rather than immediate threats the rationalization holds until midnight. The victim is lying in bed, scrolling through their phone in the dark, when a faint sound breaks the silence. It's distinct, rhythmic, and clear, footsteps coming directly above them. This architectural layout of the cabin reveals why that sound is physically impossible. The victim is lying on the top floor of a two-story structure. There is no attic. There is no crawl space. There is zero clearance between the ceiling and the slanted roof above. Any attempt to blame the noise on the house settling or woodland animals is shattered a moment later. A single heavy thump shakes the ceiling directly over the victim's head. It is the undeniable sound of human weight pressing down onto the floorboards that in total isolation. A sound that violates the laws of physics, produces a localized reality break. Without neighbors or cell signal to tether the experience to the outside world, the victim is suspended between the building's rigid logic and visceral fear. Daylight breaks the tension, but only temporarily. The victim discovers the locked door at the end of the hall is now slightly ajar. Pushing it open reveals the inside surface of the wood. It is covered in dozens of deep vertical scratch marks, violently carved into the door from the inside out. The room itself holds no storage boxes. The floor is entirely bare, except for an old stained mattress shoved into the corner. And leading away from that mattress, heading straight out into the hallway, is a trail of fresh, barefoot prints. The victim runs for their bags. At that exact second, the phone buzzes with a text. You open the door. As the victim scrambles downstairs and grabs the front door handle to escape, the lock clicks and holds firm. The door is physically jammed shut from the inside. The sound of slow, dragging footsteps descends the stairs behind them. The victim spins around to find a thin, barefoot man with sunken, pale eyes standing in the shadows. He tilts his head, smiles, and whispers, "I live here." The victim hurls a heavy lamp at the man, buying a fraction of a second to kick the jammed front door until the frame splinters. They run to their car and drive for miles. The violence of that exit, the physical resistance of the door, and the shattering would confirm the reality of the situation. There is nothing supernatural happening. This is a highly coordinated home invasion. But when the police arrive at the cabin hours later, the narrative derails. They find the front door intact. The house is completely empty. There is no mattress, there are no scratch marks, and there are no footprints. The locked room at the end of the hall is filled with standard storage boxes, exactly as the host had originally claimed. To explain a completely pristine crime scene, forensic investigators often start with a witness. Extreme burnout, heavy isolation, and acute sleep deprivation are a potent chemical cocktail for the human brain. A severe stress-induced hallucination, or condition known as parasomnia, where the brain is caught between dreaming and waking, can cause a person to hear heavy footsteps, visualize strange men in the shadows, and perceive extreme threats that do not exist. But the psychological theory falls apart under the weight of physical logistics. A hallucination cannot physically jam a front door mechanism, and a sleep-deprived brain cannot command a remote host to send perfectly synchronized threatening text messages. When the victim tries to show the police the photos they took of the scratches, their phone contains nothing. Every image captured inside the cabin has been wiped from the device's local storage. Hallucinations cannot delete localized files. This creates a paradox, a crime scene that appears pristine to the naked eye, yet has been physically scrubbed of its digital data. Solving this requires looking at the hardware the victim never saw. This diagram outlines how a real-time response system functions in a smart home. The precise timing of the text message, "You open the door," requires either a hidden IoT camera feeding live video or a localized motion trigger wired directly to the doorframe. The moment the latch turns, it fires an instantaneous alert to an external device. But the wiped photos reveal a secondary, far more aggressive layer of intrusion. As the network map expands, we see a smartphone connecting to a local Wi-Fi router. By providing free internet in a dead zone, the router acts as a bait mechanism. The moment the victim connects, the network performs a local area network attack, injecting a malicious payload into the phone's background processes. Once inside, the malware payload executes a targeted script. It bypasses the general storage and selectively scrubs specific data packets that are, in this case, geofenced photos taken within the coordinates of the cabin. It guarantees that any visual evidence captured by the victim is destroyed before they ever reach the police. The final phase of the cleanup happens on the gig economy platform itself. By the time the victim attempts to contact Daniel again, his entire host profile has been permanently deleted. The listing is removed. The digital paper trail vanishes into thin air. This system of automated surveillance and network-level scrubbing transforms a simple cabin into a technologically engineered cage, designed to monitor the occupant and then erase the trail of their experience. A week after the police close the empty investigation, the victim's phone receives one last message from an untraceable number. It contains a single line of text. "Next time, don't open the door." That single line of text definitively kills the hallucination theory. It is the final proof that a malicious human actor was orchestrating the events, manipulating the environment, and quietly watching the fallout from a distance. The gig economy forces millions of people to trade their physical safety for convenience. We drive into isolated woods, unlock unfamiliar doors, and sleep in strange beds, relying entirely on star ratings and verified badges to guarantee our security. We trust the digital profile more than our own instincts. The experience leaves behind a specific trauma, the realization that the digital safety nets meant to protect us are easily weaponized. When the infrastructure of our safety is used to dismantle our sense of reality, it leaves us entirely defenseless. The police officer delivered a sentence I still think about. He said, "You weren't the first guest to hear footsteps in the dark." This happened in Columbus, Ohio. I was in town for a week-long corporate training program, an unremarkable business trip where the only goal is to find a quiet place to sleep. I bypassed overpriced hotels for a well-reviewed house in a quiet neighborhood. The listing had 5-star reviews, a perfect verification score, and a promise of complete privacy. This lodging model relies on a single unwritten assumption. A financial transaction buys total physical isolation. When you rent a home, you expect to be the only person with a key. The neighborhood felt hollow the moment the sun went down. There were no cars moving, no neighbors on porches, and no ambient noise. Just rows of identical houses and a heavy, sterile silence. Before I checked in, the host messaged me. He said the house was all mine, but noted that the basement was strictly for storage and would remain locked. But inside, the basement door wasn't secured with a standard lock. It had a heavy industrial deadbolt installed on the hallway side. In residential architecture, you lock a bedroom from the inside to keep people out. You lock a door from the outside to ensure whatever is behind it stays there. At 2:30 a.m. on my first night, I woke up to the sound of a heavy door creaking open downstairs. Then the rhythmic thud of soft, careful footsteps moving through the kitchen. This is cognitive dissonance. When you hear an intruder in a house you believe is empty, your brain protects you from panic. It reroutes the evidence, convincing you a stranger's footsteps are just wood settling or pipes cooling down. I stayed in bed and let the rationalization win. But the next morning, I walked past the basement door and saw that the deadbolt I'd seen locked the night before was now wide open. I didn't call the host. I simply slid the bolt back into place and took a photo of the locked door with my phone. Taking that photograph changed everything. I couldn't tell myself I was misremembering anymore. I had moved from being a passive guest to an active investigator. On the second night, I didn't sleep. I just waited in the dark. At 3 a.m., a loud mechanical click echoed through the house, the sound of the basement deadbolt being turned from the other side. As the footsteps started across the kitchen floor, my phone buzzed. A text from the host arrived at 3:12 a.m. "Everything okay?" I was sitting in a dark bedroom in a house I didn't know, while a man I couldn't see was tracking exactly when I was awake. The next morning, I opened the basement door. Underneath the main floor, I found a mattress, food wrappers, and a lamp that was still warm to the touch. When I turned back to the stairs, the host was standing there, blocking the exit. I asked, "Who are you?" He just smiled and said, "I stay here sometimes." I pushed past him, ran for the front door, and didn't stop until I was in my car. The listing promised the entire place to myself. In reality, the house was a hollow shell designed to let a guest sleep while the host watched from the floor below. The police investigation confirmed the worst. The host lived in the basement full-time, continuing to book the upper floors to guests who had no idea they were sharing the house. This cross-section shows a deception. Guests used the standard ground floor entry, but the host had a hidden exterior entrance. Having his own way, it made the hallway deadbolt useless. It created a false sense of security while he moved freely beneath the floorboards. The police found that this wasn't a one-time occurrence. It was a repeated routine, a specific system he used to live rent-free while monitoring everyone who walked through his front door. Every time we book a stay in an unfamiliar home, we trust the platform's verification process to act as our security. But as those footsteps in the dark proved, the locks we see on the doors don't always protect us from the person who holds the keys.